On the morning of our anniversary, I stood inside Nashville International holding 2 tickets to Savannah and hope that felt borrowed. Wesley had called the trip our fresh start, repeating it until I believed him. 10 minutes before security, his name lit my screen, and his voice arrived warm and careful. A guest canceled, and Calvin needs me back at the station. Go through without me. Don't change anything. And don't turn one bad morning into a bigger problem. He promised. I'll be there before dinner. The call ended, and a photo from Bryn appeared before I lowered the phone. She stood outside our Germantown townhouse beside 2 suitcases, a delivery cart, and the spare key Wesley claimed was missing. Behind her, Wesley held her coat and rested one hand across her stomach. A clinic band circled her wrist, and the timestamp was 4 minutes after he told me he was racing toward the station. Bryn had written, "He doesn't need you waiting anymore." A second image followed, closer, with Wesley's palm spread over the rise beneath her sweater. I needed no explanation, because the luggage, the key, and that hand revealed the plan. He had not delayed our anniversary trip. He had used it to remove me from Nashville while another woman moved into my bedroom. I opened the airline app, canceled my seat, and called Taryn before the refund screen disappeared. He's putting her in my house, I managed, keeping my voice below the boarding announcement. Taryn did not ask whether I was certain, because certainty was standing in the photograph with my spare key. "Then don't let them believe you left," she answered. I picked up my bag, turned from security, and walked toward ground transportation while Wesley sent updates about a broadcast that did not exist. For the first time, I was no longer following the route he had chosen for me. Taryn met me outside ground transportation with a rental car and one question answered. "Your boxes are safe," she told me as I climbed in. The clothes, documents, and equipment I could not replace had left the townhouse the night before. After weeks of pretending Wesley's late calls meant nothing, I had prepared because every excuse had begun sounding rehearsed. When I opened the front door, Bryn was standing inside my bedroom with one of my hangers in her hand. 3 dresses already hung in the space Wesley had cleared, and a box of baby blankets rested beside our bed. Wesley stood in the kitchen opening champagne, wearing the shirt from the clinic photo, and the bottle slipped against the counter when he saw me. Bryn moved closer to him instead of stepping away, holding his wrist like I had entered the wrong home. "You're supposed to be at the airport," Wesley blurted, then caught himself. "Adrian, this isn't what you think." I looked at the clinic band on Bryn's wrist, the suitcases by the wall, and her shoes beneath my dresser. "Then tell me what I'm misunderstanding." Bryn lifted her chin and kept her hand on Wesley. "Your marriage has been over for months. He just didn't know how to tell you." I opened Wesley's message from that morning and read his promise that Savannah would be our fresh start, then asked which version of our marriage she had been invited to replace. Wesley shifted again, saying he wanted me somewhere quiet before we discussed the separation. I placed an envelope beside the unopened champagne and watched his confidence return when he saw paperwork. Then I explained that the townhouse lease had always been in my name, and I had already given proper notice that I would not renew it. They had a few weeks to leave, the same amount of time Wesley had planned to give me. Bryn stared at the clothes she had just hung, while Wesley understood she had not moved into his house at all. Taryn drove me to the apartment while I opened the folder Bryn had been filling for months. I had saved every image because each carried details she never meant to explain. In one, Wesley leaned across a hotel table in Memphis on a night he claimed he was meeting a guest for the station. Beside his elbow sat a receipt showing the last 4 digits of the company card he used for travel. Another photo showed them together in a rental car outside a venue, the agency logo visible through the windshield. The charge matched an expense Wesley had described as transportation for a field recording. In the clinic picture, Bryn's purse hung open enough to reveal a visitor badge from a competing station. the same place that invited Wesley to discuss a move. Once I stopped looking at their faces, the photographs began explaining what they had done. Taryn set my laptop on the counter and asked, "Where are you planning to post all of this?" I shook my head, because the private parts of their affair did not belong online. And giving strangers the pictures would give Wesley another story to tell about me. "I'm not posting anything, but the station deserves to know where its money and schedules went." I selected only the receipt, rental record, visitor badge, and messages showing Wesley had shared guest dates before they were announced. The email to Calvin Reese was careful. I explained that Bryn had sent the images voluntarily and that some appeared to involve company expenses and internal scheduling, then asked him to verify them independently. I did not mention the pregnancy, the bedroom, or the suitcases because none of that belonged in a workplace review. Before I closed the laptop, Wesley's name filled my screen with one message: "Come home so we can handle this like adults." I turned the phone face down and let it vibrate against the counter. He was still inside a house already leaving him, demanding that I return to the place he had tried to empty of me. For years, I had answered whenever he decided the conversation could begin. This time, Wesley waited. Wesley found me in the cafe beneath Taryn's building, still wearing the shirt from the clinic and carrying the confidence he used before every broadcast. He sat without asking and opened with, "What did you send Calvin?" before mentioning Bryn, the pregnancy, or the house. I told him I sent only what involved the station, and his jaw tightened because that answer gave him nothing to deny. "You need to pull it back before they review anything," he pressed, lowering his voice as if volume could turn an order into reason. He insisted the affair had nothing to do with work, and I agreed before reminding him that the company card, rental car, and guest schedule did. "I can repay the charges," he answered quickly, already reaching for the easiest part. I asked how he planned to repay the guests whose private appearance dates had reached another station before their announcements. His hand stopped beside his coffee, and for the first time since arriving, Wesley looked less angry than afraid. Then he changed direction and spoke about our marriage like it was a damaged contract he still expected me to renew. 3 years cannot disappear because I made one mistake," he said. So I opened the message Bryn had forwarded and placed it between us. In it, Wesley had written that I would leave quietly because I had nobody in Nashville and nowhere else to go. "How much did she send you?" he asked, and the question admitted more than any apology could have. When control failed, he offered money and a private agreement that would keep me from discussing him with the station or anyone else. I told him I was not selling my silence, and I had posted nothing because his own records were already speaking for him. Before leaving, I explained that my lawyer would file the divorce petition and temporary financial orders, which meant neither of us could drain accounts, cancel access, or remove shared property without scrutiny. Wesley stared at me as if the rules were an insult, but the man who planned my exit finally understood he no longer controlled the door. By the time Wesley returned to the townhouse, Bryn had pulled half her dresses from my closet and stacked them across the bed. He demanded her phone, but she held it against her chest and reminded him that he had planned an anniversary trip with me while promising her a new life. "You don't get to search me after lying to both of us," she said. Wesley asked why she had sent me the photographs, and Bryn answered that he kept delaying, returning home each night while asking her to wait. She admitted the pictures were meant to force his hand, but the folders on her phone held more than jealousy. Every message, receipt, hotel booking, and promise Wesley sent remained saved in separate albums. Insurance against the day he changed his story. Then a notification appeared from Nash Corbett, the producer at the competing station. It asked whether she had secured next month's guest list and warned that the production job would not remain open forever. Wesley understood that the opportunity he believed was waiting for him might never have included him. Bryn had used the schedules he shared to prove her value to Nash, building a path out while Wesley still described their future. When he asked how often she met Nash, she called the meetings professional. But the tablet beside her had synced a photograph of Bryn leaning against him inside a hotel elevator. The date matched the week Wesley had been recording in Texas, and it fell inside the possible window of conception. "Is the baby mine?" he asked, no longer sounding like the man who had ordered me onto a plane. Bryn replied that doctors could not name an exact day, and that she would not undergo prenatal testing merely to calm him. He had demanded blind trust from me for years, yet one uncertain answer from her left him unable to breathe. Bryn closed her suitcase, told him she would not stay in a disappearing house beside a man losing his program, and carried her bags downstairs before the champagne went warm. The woman Wesley chose was already preparing to leave him, and for the first time, he stood inside the life he had planned with nobody willing to stay behind him. The next morning, Wesley arrived at the station to rehearse his opening twice. His name was gone from the assignment board, and another host was seated behind the microphone with his notes. Calvin Reese met him outside the studio and asked him into the conference room. I was across town with Taryn, but Calvin later sent my attorney the findings, explaining what happened next. Calvin placed the company card records, rental receipts, and email logs on the table without mentioning Bryn or the pregnancy. Wesley blamed me immediately, insisting I was using a marriage problem to damage his career. Calvin answered, "Adrian gave us a reason to review the records. The records brought you into this room." The hotel charge matched the night Wesley claimed he was meeting a guest, and the rental car had never gone near the location on his report. Wesley offered to repay every charge, but Calvin told him the money was only part of the problem. 2 artists had been contacted by the competing station before their appearances were announced, using dates Wesley sent from his work account. "You gave someone outside this building information our guests trusted us to protect," Calvin told him. Wesley was suspended while the review continued, and his access badge stopped working before the morning show ended. The station released one sentence saying Wesley was absent because of an internal personnel matter. Nothing mentioned me, Bryn, or the affair, yet the effects reached him before noon. His agent paused every negotiation. The competing station withdrew its interview, and the cafe that played his recorded introduction each morning replaced it with music. Wesley had spent years making his voice impossible to miss, and one morning showed how quickly a city could continue without it. Bryn called Nash Corbett, expecting the production position he had promised her. Nash replied that he needed someone who could protect private information, not someone carrying another station's secrets through the door. By sunset, Wesley had lost the program, the job waiting beyond it, and the woman he had chosen. Every door closed because he had offered too many people things that were never his to give. Diane called, speaking as if Wesley's suspension were a mistake I had created. He could lose everything over an unhappy marriage, she warned, then demanded I tell Calvin the charges and guest schedules were misunderstood. I reminded her that Calvin was reading the station's records, not my emotions, and I could not rewrite them. When that failed, she said the Crows had treated me like family when I had nobody in Nashville. I asked whether family meant the dinner where she let me pay, then introduced me as the wife Wesley had to carry because I lacked connections. Diane went quiet, but not long enough to change her mind. By evening, she stood outside the townhouse beneath the notice, requiring the property to be returned empty. Wesley admitted the lease had always been in my name because his credit had been too weak then. He never corrected her when she told friends her son owned the place. Bryn was gone, leaving baby blankets and one unopened box beside the bedroom wall. Diane called again, asking me to extend the lease until Wesley found somewhere respectable, and I refused. The notice gave him the same lawful time every tenant received, more consideration than he planned to give me. At our first mediation session, Wesley looked smaller without the studio voice and polished opening lines. He asked me to delay the divorce because Bryn had lied, and the child might not be his. I asked, "Would you be here if she still wanted you? The baby was yours." And your program was waiting tomorrow morning? Wesley stared at the table, and the silence answered before his lawyer could rescue him. I signed my portion of the temporary agreement and stood. He had not returned because he understood our marriage. He returned because every replacement had disappeared. Diane waited in the hallway, hoping I would solve the housing problem her son had hidden for years. I walked past them both, leaving Wesley with the mother who always believed his version first. Several months later, the divorce was finalized without a trial. I kept what belonged to me before the marriage and received my fair share of what we had built together. Wesley's contract was terminated after the station confirmed the false expense reports and leaked guest schedules. He found production work at a smaller station, behind the microphone instead of in front of it, where his name no longer opened doors. Bryn gave birth, and the paternity test confirmed Wesley was not the father. Nash never became the man who rescued her, and she left Nashville after the contacts she had used stopped returning her calls. Diane helped Wesley carry the last boxes from the townhouse she bragged he owned. Taryn stood beside me when the final decree arrived, then returned to her own life because real friendship does not need an audience. I completed an audio series about people rebuilding after the future they trusted disappeared. During that work, I grew close to Everett Dane, an editor who knew I had been married and never asked when I would belong to someone again. At Nashville International, Wesley waited near security, thinner and quieter than the man who had ordered me onto a plane. "I understand what I lost now," he said, asking for one final conversation. I told him, "You didn't lose me when the station fired you. You lost me the morning you bought a ticket to remove me from my own home." Then I walked through security while Everett waited beyond the gate, holding the coffee he had offered to carry. The first time, Wesley chose my destination and expected me to disappear. This time, I had chosen the flight, the company, and the life waiting after landing. I once believed starting over meant admitting I had failed. Peace arrived when I stopped measuring my future by Wesley's regret and began trusting the life I was building with my own hands. Love returned slowly, without demands or rescue. It simply made room for me to remain fully myself.